Okay, so simple creatures. I have appetites and I have aversions that direct all of my activities in this world. I try to get what I want. I have an appetite for X. I use all of my power to attempt to attain X. I have an aversion to Y. I use all of my power to avoid Y. Right? This is Hobbes' treatment of why it is that we do all of the things that we do. We have large collections of likes and dislikes, right, that kind of push and pull us through the world, right? I want a hamburger, I like X, right? I don't want pickles, I don't like Y. Simple, simple creatures, so I'll have a hamburger without pickles, right? Now, Hobbes wants to make a further claim on top of this, and that is that good and evil, right, are simply expressions of appetite and aversion. Right? So if you're looking for an absolute good, a greatest good, in Hobbes, you're not going to find one. When I say that it is evil to murder someone, I just mean I don't like it. Right? When I say it is good to help your fellow man, right, I just mean I like it. Right? So good and evil are simply expressions of appetite and aversion, right, in Hobbes' position here. Right? Now, when we deliberate about something, what Hobbes is claiming that we do is we sway between appetites and aversions. Right? Remember, in Book 3 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, he called practical wisdom or prudence the excellence of the faculty of deliberation. Right? Well, in Hobbes, right, it's rather simple. Right? When I deliberate about something, whether I should take this degree program or that degree program, this job or that job, date this person or that person, what I'm doing is coming up with a complicated pros and cons list in terms of these appetites and aversion. Well, I like this about that, but I don't like that. But I really don't like this, but it's this other opportunity has this going for it. So I weigh these up, right, when I deliberate, and the will is sort of the big winner, right? That's where I make a choice, right, about I'll teach for this university, or I will date this person, or I will take this as my major, right, or take this course for the semester, right? So ultimately, right, what Hobbes claims is that we're not, again, complicated creatures, right? We just sway between our likes and our dislikes, right? Now this is kind of enhanced by our ability to, understand causal relationships. If I produce this cause, this effect is likely to follow, right? So I can, in a sense, strategize in terms of my advantages, right? I can also, in a sense, strategize about what sort of risks or threats there are, right, with a particular activity. Right? And in this way, right, we become complicated strategic creatures, right, in Hobbes' account. And this all goes into the deliberation process. And the final tally is that which we have an overall appetite or aversion to. Right? That's what informs our final decision. So again, with Hobbes' conception of human nature, right, we're really simple creatures. Now, this might lead you to the conclusion that the ethics that arises out of Hobbes is something kind of like what we saw in Aristotle. Right? Happiness can save us. It's what we want in the end all the time. It's that greatest good. Well, for Hobbes, happiness, it's not an activity of the soul in accord with virtue as Aristotle would claim. Right? It's simply getting what we want. He calls it continual success in obtaining those things that we want. That is, happiness is simply to satisfy desire. Well, you should already be thinking about a couple of potential problems with this. If happiness is simply satisfying desire, well, the second I satisfy desire, since I am in a state of motion and everything else is in a state of motion, that desire changes, or the object that was meant to satisfy that desire changes. Everything is coming into being and passing away. There is nothing permanent which will give us final satisfaction. So Hobbes has stumbled on a point that the Buddhists make, right? This is why samsara is dukkha. This is why life is suffering, because anytime we try to satisfy our desires, since we're changing and our desires are changing, the objects that satisfy our desires are changing, then we will wind up frustrated. Right? Now, to compound things, by Hobbes' estimation, well, we're limited creatures. We only have so much power to satisfy so many desires. So power is finite. The problem, claims Hobbes, is that desire, not so much finite as it is infinite. Right? So no matter how much I get, I'm always going to want more. And when I get that more, I'm going to want more. Right? So what Hobbes has set up here is a situation very similar to what Aristotle was setting up in Book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics. Right? If everything that we try to attain as an end is simply a means to some further end, and that end a means to some further end, and so on and so forth, right? Aristotle saw this as a losing proposition. Then all desire would be in vain, right? Because nothing we ever attain will ever finally satisfy us, right? So right off the bat, what Hobbes is doing is shutting the door to our traditional attempts to establish an ethics, right? Now, in terms of how we're able to satisfy our desires, well, what Hobbes points out is that this does come down to power, right? And in terms of power, we have basically at our disposal simply the faculties of body and mind, right? And in both in terms of the faculties of body and the faculties of mind, what he points out to us is that there is sort of an ability to enhance what we are naturally born with, right? So in terms of our intellectual power, right, our ability to use our mind to solve our problems, what he tells us is that what this comes down to is wit, or common sense. And we attain this through experience, right, through its frequent use, right? Now, in terms of what we're born with, our natural common sense, right, our common horse sense, he points out that this has to do with sort of a clarity of imagination and the will or steady direction to attain our goals, right? And this natural wit, we just use common sense and it becomes better, right? Dullness or stupidity has to do with a lack of common sense, a lack of natural wit. And, right, all of this common sense can be, in a sense, enhanced by what he calls acquired wit, or acquired common sense, right? And that's what we do when we try to educate ourselves, right? Acquired wit, or acquired common sense, is what we're naturally born with, but enhanced by education in the use of reason, that is, the right use of speech, which is descriptive of the nature of causality. Now, as we get an education, we can become rather annoyed, right, with the number of technical terms that are used, different weighting and ranking scales and that sort of thing. And as we're learning, we get really frustrated, right, with all of these definitions that we've got to learn, etc., etc. But what Hobbes wants to point out to us is that we are able to, in a sense, enhance our ability to think clearly about how to get what we want with these educational tools of technical terms, of methodologies, what have you, right? Because, right, this language, this rational language, maps onto experience in such a way that it can enhance our ability to get what we want, right? Now, ultimately, giddiness or madness, as Hobbes points out, and this should be familiar from Plato, is simply, like we found in Plato, the overcoming of natural wit by the passions. I want something so bad that I ignore what's best for me.